I think there's two things that leaders right now need to be watching for. One is how to harness creativity in your team, and the other is how to harness critical thinking in your team. Because, especially in our more junior team members that we'll be leading, AI is going to be such a native thing to our new team members that critical thinking is going to be a little bit lost. Now we've got these AI systems that can do so much of the legwork, but we will put too much trust into them.
Welcome to the Leadership Disrupted podcast. And just a brief note before we get started today, whether you're viewing or listening to this on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I appreciate you equally. And earlier this week, I just want to mention that we were notified by Spotify that our subscriber base grew by more than 400% in 2025. Now, who knew there were so many leadership nerds out there? And so what I'd like to do is continue that growth. And if you're not currently a subscriber, you're of course welcome to subscribe. It's totally free. And when you hit the like button, it does let other leadership nerds out there know that there's a place where they can go for kind of a weekly mental boost. And with that, today, Tamara Laine joins us. And Tamara is an Emmy Award-winning journalist, communication specialist, and business strategy leader. She's frequently sought after to provide innovative brand solutions and transformative change to organizations. She has a proven track record driving explosive growth for B2C and B2B organizations with data-driven strategies, AI integrations, and scalable solutions. And I know that's a lot, but I still have a little more that I want to say about her before we bring her on. She is also co-host of the What the Frac podcast, where she is a professional BS cutter. She's a professional myth buster. The show is another weekly permission slip, essentially to flip the tables on the boardroom. And they get to the bottom line of how senior leaders are harnessing new trends, new tools, new tactics, and AI to fuel actual sustainable growth. What I love about What the Frac is it's genuinely interesting and genuinely useful information. And then finally, and this is a long intro, I know, but Tamara contains many multitudes. She's also a founder of Empower, where they're redefining what it means to be creditworthy in the new economy, where gig workers, creators, and non-traditional earners make up a growing majority and yet remain invisible to the outdated credit systems. So there's a lot to talk about. We're going to be hearing more about Empower as well. And with all of that said, I'm going to take a deep breath, Tamara, and just say, welcome to Leadership Disrupted. Great to have you. You hail from New Hampshire. I hail from North Dakota. So we're not spanning the country, but we're spanning half the country. It's great to have you here. And I know I said a lot of words. So is there anything that you would want to share initially to kind of fill in any gaps or really give us a sense of who you are before we dive deep into the conversation?
Well, besides that, I'm a fellow leadership nerd, like everybody else listening as well. I love to talk about and to explore new leadership styles, methodologies, thought processes, right? That is just something that I think is so important for a leader to keep doing. It's just that continual learning. But to bridge the gap on anything that I'm doing, your intro was phenomenal. I am a very blessed person, very lucky to be able to follow my passions. And my passions have led me to some extraordinary places, from being an investigative journalist in the beginning of my career to working with female founders, launching companies from 0 to 1, launching my own company from 0 to 1, and being a fractional executive and advisor. So I love getting up in the morning and everything I do. And I'm very lucky to do that.
That's fantastic. So let's dive deep fast. What do you see changing in the world of leadership and leadership development? I mean, no one questions that, particularly post-pandemic, the world of business has shifted and changed in numerous ways. Not just AI, but AI, of course, is a big factor in that shift. But with all of the changes that have occurred, how do you see, I guess, what I'll call the optimal leadership model shifting?
I think there's two things that leaders right now need to be watching for. One is how to harness creativity in your team, and the other is how to harness critical thinking in your team. Because, especially in our more junior team members that we'll be leading, AI is going to be such a native thing to our new team members that critical thinking is going to be a little bit lost. Um, you and I, when we've been coming up in our careers, right? Critical thinking and in order to analyze something and understand if it's going in the right direction or if it's in the wrong direction. We had so many factors that went into it. Now we've got these AI systems that can do so much of the legwork, but we will put too much trust into them, right? And and it's essential that we don't lose that critical thinking that took so long for people like myself to harness. And we have to figure out how to teach that to the next generation while also leveraging all the good technology, all the great things that AI has to offer. So I think those are the two things that we need to balance because creativity is going to be something that's one of the most valued
Mhm.
tools coming up, and critical thinking.
Well, let's unpack each of those somewhat separately. So when it comes to critical thinking, it's easy to say, and it's even easy to recognize, okay, we've got an issue there, but knowing what to do about it, I think is a struggle because essentially, in order to learn to think hard, you have to think hard, and yet we're not AI is allowing us to not think as hard as perhaps we used to have to think. I'll give you one quick example. I mentioned to you prior to the podcast, a few years ago, we moved to a very rural area, and I had to learn to use something that I had never used before. I've never used an acreage sprayer. I have 10 acres of hayland, and I had to spray it each year, twice a year, with a cattle friendly spray. Um, and I ordered the proper spray. I asked my neighbor, like, what do you normally use? I ordered what he told me to put on the land, and yet it's not like a consumer product, so it doesn't come with, okay, press this button and it sprays. You have to decide, all right, what's the size of your spray tank, what's the speed of your, how fast does it go, how wide does it spread. You basically have to determine how are you going to apply this in your sprayer unit. And I 2 years ago, when I did this the first time, I sat down with a piece of paper and I figured it all out. It took time. I sat there for about 45 minutes and did the hard math because there weren't instructions on how to figure it out. So I had to remind myself, okay, what are the factors? Well, there's the width of the sprayer, there's the depth of the tank, but there's also the gallons per minute of the actual pump and all of that. And it was kind of hard, but I figured it out. And the point of the story is a year and a half later, when I had become much more familiar with ChatGPT and I had not kept my notes, big mistake of mine. I should have kept all of my calculations. I was doing it again. And instead, I went to my phone and I just tapped on ChatGPT and I said, hey, I need to figure this out. Tell me what you need to know. And it asked me the right questions. And I essentially went through the entire same process, but I was being led by ChatGPT. And in the end, it shot out the answer, gave me the answer. I did the thing that I need to do. And then I had this moment of realization. I thought, I remember what it felt like after I figured it out myself, like how it was hard, but I was kind of proud. Like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
I
you feel
remembered all the math and I did it. But this last time, it was like white sugar for my brain. It was nothing. I didn't get anything out of it, and it felt like, man, that's potentially what younger employees are doing every day now. They're not doing the hard thinking. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on how you
well,
problem identified, what do we do about it?
yeah, because I mean, the thing with that is, yes, the tool is really good. So, right, so we should be leveraging it, and younger team members should be leveraging it to do something as like as like a thought partner. What will be missing is you and I, when ChatGPT pops something up that we're like, wait, this doesn't seem right,
Yeah.
right? We are so trained to try and think critically and go, okay, this, when it doesn't line up, what do I do? And like, I've got these resources in my pocket to try and sort through something that doesn't seem right, or to ask the questions in order to go, okay, is this true? Is this the right direction we should be going in? Maybe we should rethink this. I'm going to ask some different questions. I'm going to look at some other places where I would say the AI native generation isn't going to grow up that way. So how do we train? How do we install that sort of thought process into a generation that will not have to go through the same struggles that we went through to figure things out in like the school of hard knocks? That's actually something I've been thinking a lot about, not with my team members yet, but with my daughter and my kids, because I'm like, how do I teach these skills where that won't be lost when they start using technology? And the other thing I think about, and this also translates to younger team members, and just a lot of team members as remote work has taken over, is how to be resilient, right? How to take feedback, how to think critically, how to take feedback, and how to, be in a place where you hear a lot of diverse opinions in order to create something really special, right? In my career, listening to harsh feedback has been a part of it and has only made me better. Now, sometimes, let's just say there's been leaders who have given just harsh feedback and it was mean and it was cruel, and I learned how to be resilient in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the harshest feedback I got was the best thing for me, my project, my career, right? And feedback is usually given by those who care about you the most, who want you to thrive. And so they're taking their time to give you something that will benefit you. So those are the things, as we are remote, using AI a lot, I think those are really getting lost. And so what do you do about it? I think you have to cultivate space for it, right? So as you're doing your projects, you have to insert time for critical thinking, for feedback, and for poking holes in your assumptions with team members. And you have to foster, and this is kind of part of fostering creativity as well, you have to foster the environment to be contrarian. And to say, like, let's get your thoughts, your original thoughts. And we want all of those here so that, we can put them together, we can sort through them, and then we can come up with a better product or a better environment, better project. And that, I think, are the big tools that as a leader and cultivating your team, you can start to interject and put a lot more priority on, because we can do a lot of output, but a lot of the output is now seeming to be the same because everyone's using AI.
And you smell it. You may not be able to specifically say, well, this is it, but there's this sense of, oh, that article is perfectly beige or perfectly accurate, or this rewrite of the I work with a lot of instructional designers. We develop leadership programs, and I will look at a program where I can just feel AI there. I can't point to it, but I can feel it. And that's when you have to have the kind of conversations that you're talking about, where you step back and you ask the instructional designer, okay, let's set the content aside, put the PowerPoints away. Tell me what your point is. Tell me what and then if they struggle and I realize, okay, this is not really embedded itself yet in your mind. I'm struggling with this. It's hard to give them the guidance to say, I need you to be the subject matter expert and AI to be the productivity booster. Right now, it feels like AI is doing your hard thinking. So I'm going to ask you to do some of the hard thinking, but that takes time. It takes effort. It takes kind of hands-on guidance at first. And I think instead, a lot of leaders just get excited about the productivity boost. Oh,
Yeah.
you can produce so much more quickly, and it's good enough. Is it good enough? I struggle with that as well.
I can't tell you how many marketing plans I get that I'm like, just like
Yeah.
that is straight ChatGPT. Like you didn't even try.
Yeah.
And like I'm guilty of using it as well when I'm in a crunch and I put my thoughts in but you refine, you read through it, you make sure that the thoughts that you want are in there, and then you leverage it to enhance your thoughts and but not be your thoughts.
I had an experience where one of the projects I was working on was I was interviewing about 15 leaders of an organization, and I had about a 45 to 50-minute interview with each of them one-on-one. And I had a set of starter questions, but like any good conversation, the conversations went in different directions with different leaders, um, and I transcribed all of those. I used AI to record and transcribe. So I had an easy transcription of all 15 conversations. And then what I did do is I leveraged ChatGPT. I uploaded all of those documents, and I asked it to give me the major themes that came out from that, highlight specific other recommendations. And then I took that document and used that as my starting point because I wanted to produce an analysis of those 15 conversations. And it did a pretty decent job of identifying the major themes, but it wasn't perfect. And if someone else had gone through that exact same process, I don't think they would have caught some of the more nuanced, subtle issues that also came out in the conversations. But the reason I'm sharing this is, as I was recounting this process to someone that I work closely with, she said, "Well, why don't you just automate the conversations? Provide them the questions, or have some AI system deliver the questions to them, and then we could record their answers, or they could type out their answers." And she completely missed the point,
Yeah.
because the real skill in that process wasn't from AI. It was the conversations. The subtle skill is engaging with a human, having a few starter questions, and then deciding what direction do I take this branch of the conversation? How deep do I go with this branch? What
Critical.
topics do I introduce? That's the real human skill. And then you gather that up. The theming is a little more administrative, and it saved me hours of time. It was a great tool, but used like a scalpel or a laser, as opposed to replacing the deep thought.
Yeah.
Where I struggle truly is, I get that because I get that. I've struggled to help others get that. I think if you don't have that foundation of subject matter expertise or that problem solving muscle, I imagine, you like me, we grew up having to figure stuff out, having to solve problems. It wasn't quite as bad as, my dad throwing me in the water to figure out how to swim. But it was close. It wasn't that, but it was figure stuff out. And I don't. So when we talked about critical thinking, I think there's, critical thinking applied to problem solving, applied to difficult conversations, applied to what happens when the world isn't the way I think it should be. I mean, there are all kinds of applications of critical thinking. And I agree with you. It's a big gap that is growing over
Growing.
time.
It's
And
growing. I mean, and I think like with that, and one of the things that I'm very concerned about is, like if we want to think about the next generation of entrepreneurs, I'm an entrepreneur. I love being an entrepreneur. An
yeah,
entrepreneur has to be so resilient. And so because in order to be an entrepreneur, you have to hear no 1,000 times. And so how are we teaching the next, generation of
yeah,
entrepreneurs to be as resilient? And so these are the things that I think about when I'm bringing on new team members, when I'm thinking about, who I partner with, all of these things like resilience and critical. Those are my three. I'll be on a soapbox about
yeah.
resilience, critical thinking, creativity.
So let's talk about creativity a bit, because this entire world is being shifted by AI. I know directly some youngish graphics designers who quickly saw AI take over their simple graphics design world. It's like the easy stuff was suddenly able to be done, much more cheaply, much more cost effectively. Some of them lost their jobs because they were early in their career. They were making a living doing some of this simple stuff, some of the easy stuff. And even one of them said to me, even when I pointed out to my boss, look, this is actually not that good. It's bad in this way. And it's the boss said, yeah, but it's good enough. It's good enough, and it's so much faster and so much more cost effective. We're going to eliminate a third of our graphics team. That makes it tough. And then the graphics tools have been getting better and better and better pretty rapidly, but maybe not as rapidly as leaders think they are getting, because I spoke with a leader I spoke with a video graphics person who had been directed by his leadership team to shift toward AI generated video. And he was struggling because he was trying to create the same quality he was able to deliver as a human. And he was struggling to get the AI tools to deliver the same level of quality. But because he had the direction, he was directed to do this. What he has started doing is spending extra hours creating it as a human, but claiming that it was AI generated, because his directive was 60% AI generated by this date and time. It was horrible, just a horrible experience. And so I think AI is presenting for us so many subtle leadership challenges. And I wonder, in the same way that it has the potential to kill off critical thinking and problem solving, will it kill off creativity? What's your take on that?
I feel like creativity and storytelling are one of the most basic human experiences, right? If we think back for centuries, as far back as we can remember, stories are the way that we have retained history, that we've retained community, that we've retained our connection as humans. You've got the great philosophers and the great stories like the Odyssey and the Iliad of passing down, oral histories. I don't think that creativity is going to go anywhere. I think it's going to reimagine itself. And I think that there'll be a big realignment in how, because right now it's really cool. Oh, AI can do all this stuff. And sometimes it's hard to tell the difference, but I think we're going to be able to spot it really easily soon. And storytelling and connecting is one of the few things that, like we genuinely crave and want. And so I think that that's going to be something that really recenters. And that, like, again, if you're looking for the tools and the skills that will help you in your career moving forward, creativity is going to be one of those things that like will boost you ahead if you've got that. So I hope, I genuinely think that is going to be something that comes back, the pendulum swings back, and that we will want something that is deeply human.
And it may be harder. It may be harder because AI is capable of doing the easier stuff, what I hate to call it the lower level creativity, but the less counterintuitive stuff AI is going to be able to do. And I have a message out for all of my LinkedIn friends. I have lots of LinkedIn colleagues. I just want you to know that it is noticeable when you suddenly start posting more frequently on LinkedIn. You suddenly start sharing more stories where I have more than a handful who I know their pattern from the past. And suddenly their pattern of posting changes from, oh, I'll post a clever comment, or I'll post a witty little dialogue. Now it's, you click on the post, and there right in the post is 7 paragraphs of a story, long story, not a bad story, but it has the smell of AI. It's not bad, but suddenly you're posting those twice a week. And for some of these friends. I may never feel comfortable saying this to them directly, but I don't ever click on more again because every time I click on more, it's like, oh, now it's this. And I just know it's going to be an AI version of this thing that you were thinking or this thing that you experienced, unless you're some amazing producer of content, unless you're L. Ron Hubbard and you can write 50 novels in 10 years, unless you're or who's in a, or you're Stephen King. We have these hyper prolific writers, but most of us are humans. And if we can get one decent article out a week, thoughtful, thought-provoking, that's synthesized and summarized, I think from a writing standpoint, the big creativity skill that's going to be valued in the future is saying more with less, is synthesizing. And synthesizing is not just cutting it down. It's like getting to the core of the thought or core of the whatever, but doing it quickly where people go, I get this, whatever it is. If you can do that in 3 sentences versus 8 paragraphs, that's a skill people are, and that probably is true with marketers as well. Can you get to it and drive the change, but do it quickly? Because I don't know anybody who's going to paragraph 3, who's like reading through to paragraph 3, unless someone has really grabbed me for some reason.
It's interesting. So I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day who's a writer. And it was because she posted on her Instagram that Anthropic was hiring writers for highly paid writers. I think that the job was somewhere around like $300,000.
Wow.
And it was like, this shows you how important these skills are. And they are to companies that are creating the AI. And then in the post for the job, it was very specific that they needed to not use AI. And they should only use AI for like a few certain purposes, but that like Anthropic wanted to see their writing. And so
that is interesting, like fantastically curious. I mean, but you would imagine, I mean, they know the strengths and weaknesses of their system better than any of us. And for them to be that specific, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So creativity, critical thinking, resilience, isn't that everything? I mean, basically AI is putting at risk some of the very core elements of what makes us good leaders, what makes us good contributors in the workplace. And particularly when it comes to resilience, do you have any thoughts there? Because if you have resilience, if you have grit, maybe that can help you solve the other issues where you fall down and you get up. You hear a point of view that you're adamantly opposed to, but you actually decide curiously to use that to inform yourself about how the other person is thinking, as opposed to jumping into the debate. But I think that's also at risk. I keep saying with younger generations, but I think this is true. This is one of those issues where if you are in your 20s, these are your formative years, and you're probably not being required to solve problems, to think, to create in the way that some older people were required to pre-AI. So it is going to impact us.
I've talked a lot about leaders creating the space for team members to fail. That's one of the more important things to do for creativity, because if your team doesn't feel like they can fail, then they are not going to take risks in order to, formulate really great ideas, really great campaigns. Because you need those moments of like, let's try this, right? When we teach our kids, it's I don't know, what if, let's try, right? And you experiment until you find the right thing that works. But in workplaces where you don't have the ability to say, let's try, because God forbid you fail, and then, you're a pariah or there's consequences. If you can create that space where you try, maybe fail fast, pivot quickly, the opportunity for really incredible success is there. But that goes right into resilience. So
Yeah.
when you create the space for your team to be able to fail, you then also create the structure for your team to gain resilience. And because they're going to learn that failure is not the end, right? And they're going to learn maybe some harsh feedback with opportunity at the other end of that. And so that sort of structure, I think, is really a good way to look at growth and team dynamics that help with creativity, resilience, and then really outcome success.
And when you use that phrase, creating space, essentially you're asking leaders to give it time, give it. I think some leaders, not all, of course, but some have gotten so excited about the productivity increase that suddenly they're thinking, all right, so this group of 5 employees, we could maybe eliminate one of the positions and still achieve the same level of productivity. So or we can get more from those 5 employees, get 20% more, 30% more, whatever the output is. But if you're immediately going to that, then you're not giving your employees any time for them to benefit from the enhanced productivity. Let's imagine the productivity boost saves you 100 hours in a week with a particular group of people. Does that 100 hours all have to be, okay, achieve more? And let's fill that 100 hours with more projects, more to-dos. Can you let them have half of that? Can you say, all right, so we'll be able to do more in less time, which should give you some more time to noodle on things, to contemplate things, to think deeply on some topics, maybe not every topic, but on some of your projects. We can make your life better and easier, as well as achieve more productivity. But it feels to me like instead we're all being overwhelmed with productivity porn. Can we just get more done faster, more? And so then employees aren't experiencing any of the benefits of AI. It just flows right up to their employer, or they're getting frustrated and they're moving on because they just don't like that.
It's the same catch-22 that happened during the pandemic with remote work. I'm a huge remote work advocate. But what happened is most people who did remote work ended up working more than they did when they were going into the
Yeah.
office. And people expected them to be available 24/7 versus I'm at the office from 8 to 5 or whatever, your hours were. Now remote work was you were expected to answer the phone at 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And yes, it's totally fine that your family's in the background and you're cooking dinner, but you still have to be on this call, right? Like, I love that phrase. Like, it's totally fine that your family's there. We don't mind it at all. And you're like, yeah, but it's dinner time.
Yes.
I have to be watching this,
Uh-huh.
2-year-old. It's fine for you. It's not fine for me. So where this balance comes back that you're speaking about, I think, like there's going to be a reckoning with people being demanded more of. And that's the kind of same thing that happened with the pandemic. Everybody got burnt out.
Yeah.
Same thing will happen here soon. So yeah, you do have to find that balance of being really excited by productivity, because of course it's exciting. And how do we then make AI do what it's supposed to do, which is make our lives better?
Well, and I will admit that when we first went to remote work in, I think it was March or April of 2020, I believe, I got excited, and because I'm a guy in front of screens most of the time anyway, without intending to, I put a lot of pressure on my people, and I was sending, Teams messages out at 7 in the evening, 9 in the evening, because how I evolved was, I would get up early, I would have kind of a wave of work, and then I would take a break, and then have another wave of work, and then take a break, another wave, and that it kind of never ended, up until 8 or 9 o'clock. And I did come to a point where I realized, all right, I'm burning some people out, and they're trying to be responsive, and their waves of work don't always align with my waves of work.
Mm.
So I actually love working until 8:30, 9 o'clock, but it's not 7 a.m. to 9 o'clock. It's a series of waves where I take breaks, I go outside for walks, I do other things. I but that's me. And so what I ended up having to do with each one of my direct reports, we had kind of a come to Jesus moment where we came to an agreement regarding our work patterns and how could we make these work together. And then and part of that had to be, hey, when is it okay to just ignore my team's messages until the next morning? Or I need to be more sensitive if I'm sending a message out to say in advance, hey, I'm thinking of this now, so I'm sending it out now, but no need to respond until you're back whenever. But and what I found is it wasn't just a single. Okay, we all come together and we develop one way of working that we all flow with. It really was talking to each person and coming to the conclusion regarding the work pattern that worked for them. Had to be very intentional, and yes, it was more work. But I will say we ultimately were all much more productive, um, as opposed to assuming that 9 to 5 is the model and you log in or you come to the office, go to your cube, you're there for a set amount of time, you take your break at a set amount of time, you leave at a set amount of time. Last thing I'll say about that is I have heard from leaders who have directed their employees to come back to the office. They've said, okay, we've lost our culture. I don't believe that, but we've lost our culture. We've got to come back so that we can be more productive. We can work more closely together. And I've heard 3 things that I'll share quickly. The first is I've heard that HR departments have done surveys and studies and have determined that it does improve productivity. I think that's BS. I think HR is doing the surveys and studies because senior leadership has asked, hey, we need to know, is this really working? But in the way they communicate it, they're saying, we need to know, wink, wink, that this is really working, and so they're given the data that they want. Maybe I'm overly cynical, but that's what I think. What I've also heard is that when these teams come back into the office, they still prefer to work, quote, remotely. I've seen teams where, okay, we're having our weekly meeting at 1 p.m. and everyone stays in their cube and they all log into the Teams channel. So because they've gotten used to that, and also it feels more productive when I can log in and I can still be at my desk and I can, occasionally multitask or whatever. But then the third thing that I've heard is employees, when you force them into the office at 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. or whenever the time is, they want to leave. And then if they leave, they don't want to be taking messages at 7 p.m. or 8 or 9 p.m. because they put in their time. They did their tasks in that box that you put them in, that time box. And you can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, yeah, we want to come back to the office, but we're used to you on Saturdays taking an hour or two during your normal wave of work, responding things. You have to pick and choose. And I think in the end, most organizations, if they were applying critical thinking, they would say, maybe it's not one size fits all. Maybe there are some employees for whom the 9 to 5 model and the come into the office model is the ideal model. And then maybe there are other employees where it's different. But that takes hard thinking, that takes complex thinking, that takes nuanced thinking. And it's not just young folks. I think broadly speaking, that's something that we're losing. So sorry, I know I'm ranting. I feel like
I mean, you said it well. I think all those things are true. I've heard, that coming together as a team is what fosters creativity. And I do believe that you've used the word waves, right? Like, that's why it's really great to have you could have a team retreat, right? There's different ways to do it that aren't just coming back into the office 9 to 5. I genuinely believe a lot of that is because you have to justify the real estate that you own, which is fine. That is not a bad thing. The world has changed. And so we do have to look at the things that we have and how it operates, and now how people want to behave and how they want to work. So there's a lot to grapple with there. I guess I'm just kind of like a remote native. Most of the work that I've done has always been remote, in one way or another. When I was an investigative journalist, I was in the field a lot. I was only in the studio when I was on air. So I feel like I started remote and just kept going. And so, yeah, I think that there is a way, and it hasn't been done well yet, to figure out how to do hybrid. And that will be like really the great work environment moving forward.
I was inspired. I went to visit a client in Warsaw, Poland last year, and large global client based in Warsaw, and they have a huge campus in the kind of the downtown area of Warsaw. It is a tall building, multiple floors. They use or used the entire building. And when I came to meet with them, there was a group of 8 people that I was meeting with, and the floor after floor was empty, just empty. Still, still well tended, still well lit. They were keeping everything up, and they were deciding where we should have the meeting. And they said, there's an area over there that gets a lot of sunlight, and there are a few tables. Let's go meet over there. They had like no shortage of space where to meet. And then I asked them about possible transition back to the office. And one of them said, we know how much this costs us. This is a sunk cost for all of this real estate. But what we've been told by senior leaders is that they're going to align with the employee base and what is actually driving productivity, as opposed to pushing us all back into the office in order to gain some benefit from the real estate they've invested in. And we also think that eventually, once the market turns around, they'll probably be selling off or leasing off a big portion of these spaces. It was a beautiful office. It was a kind of architecturally a shame that there weren't more humans around. But I love the clarity of their thinking, that they weren't looking at a line item to say, all right, this is what we're paying every month for real estate. Man, we got to get some use out of that. But again, I think that was.
I'm going to say the only downside that I see with fully remote, and again, since I've been fully remote and I haven't really dealt with this as much, is for the new, like, younger team members, they do lose out on watching how the executive team and the directors operate. Just being around, that sort of atmosphere, you learn so much. And so I will say, for myself, for others that I know that are in the same, boat as me, or doing startups, or, at my level, remote is exactly where I want to be. For the younger team members, I understand how much they're missing on by just observing how to handle stress, how to handle conflict, how to handle presentations, how to handle, preparing. You learn so much by observing that. And so how do we then figure out how to do that in a remote way, so that younger team members learn through example how to become better leaders?
And then you have to be very intentional about that, so that you don't use Teams meetings or remote meetings just for tasks to get the projects done or the jobs done. You have to kind of broaden your aperture to say, let's have some of that. Let's have some of that kind of less formal meeting time where we all do come together, but in the same way as we would in the office, where it's a little more informal, where we get a sense of how do people talk through things, how do people those sidebar conversations. It's the one area where remote probably is not as effective, and requires more. But you can get there, or get a long way there, if you are very intentional as a leader. But that takes, again, time, energy, and intent. One thing I don't want to do is get too far into this and forget to talk about empower, because I know you've got a lot of your own self vested in this Empower organization and the mission of Empower. Can you tell us a little bit about that organization?
Yeah, so we're the first agentic ecosystem to build products for lenders to lend to the gig economy. And I say it's the new economy. So think about gig workers, caregivers, Gen Z, those who interact with the banking system differently. It's a huge, huge amount of our labor force. So just the gig economy itself is about 80 million. It's about half of the US workforce. And 6 out of 10 of them report that they have been denied a loan. And so it is a huge area of growth and in financial inclusion that I'm incredibly passionate about. And so that's why we created Empower, because we believe that, financial inclusion is a basic human right and that we can leverage AI to solve this problem. And so we're building it. We're a lean startup. We're about to have our MVP, and it's a very exciting time to be a part of our organization.
Is there an active website where people can go to learn more?
Yeah, so you can go to empowerai.com
Okay.
and learn more, and book a demo if you want. We are actively looking for people to do pilots with us to try our product. So you can DM me on LinkedIn if you're interested, and I'd love to talk with you.
And I'll make sure we include all those links in the show notes or episode notes, so that if someone is interested, they know exactly where to go. I like to save the harder questions for last, and so I'm gonna hit you with a hard question, and I'm going to apologize up front because I don't know that there's a clear, distinct answer for this. Maybe there is. Maybe you've got it. So I have a sense, because I talk to leaders every week. I talk to young leaders, mid-career leaders, senior leaders a lot. And I have this sense that senior leaders might not use this term, but they're used to leading with a heavy hand, meaning they have the position, they have the authority, they have the gravitas, they have a lot behind them that says, when I say march, we march. We don't question, we don't ask why, we march. Now, many of them would say, no, that's not me, that's not my style. But when you observe them from the back of the room, they may not feel it, but in fact, the gravitas of them and their position, their role, their experience tends to get them a lot of compliance that younger leaders, of course, don't innately have. But what younger leaders seem to be, actually what young followers seem to be wanting, is not a heavy hand, but a light touch, that mentorship touch, that coaching touch, that sometimes parenting touch, that guidance, that sense of, you see me, you're in this with me, you want me to succeed, and you're not expecting so much of me so quickly. And if my dog died and I'm having a bad week, it's okay for me to say I'm having a bad week, and you will actually not roll your eyes and shift the conversation to my KPIs, but you will actually feel something because I'm feeling something. That lighter, and maybe that's not the right word, but it's the word that comes to me, that lighter touch leadership, I think is the future of leadership. But it's hard because older leaders view that as weakness. They view that as not having power, not being able to drive the army forward. My question is, how do we balance the two, or do we not balance the two? Do we just move in the lighter touch direction? And how can, maybe this is the more tough question, how can leaders from that old school playbook evolve to see that lighter touch leadership as being equally, maybe even more powerful than their historic playbook? There, I just laid a lot on you. So,
yes, that was a long. So let me try and dissect it and answer it with what comes to mind first. So one, I think the way you're describing it, there's two different ways. There's different ways to look at it. So when I look at leadership is as more of, I wouldn't say a light touch, I say collaborative. So I think the most important thing a leader can do is have incredibly strong people around them, that are contributing as much as possible to the success of the company, the organization, in the most passionate way that they can. And so, therefore, the job of a leader is to wrangle the greatness around them. And so I wouldn't call it a light touch. I would say that that leader who can wrangle greatness around them and then pull out the best and corral
Mhm.
the things that are not working is the skill that gets leaders farther, right? A leader who kind of the way you described that is like the only one that makes the decisions, it's top down, that's a lonely path, right? And we can think of leaders who do that, and I won't name any names. So you can think of those that do that, and I'm sure that they have a lot of success. But the companies that grow faster, quicker, and are more innovative are the ones that do the style that I was talking about, which is though that leader is not intimidated by a very incredible, strong person that they are
Yeah.
hiring. They know that I'm going to leverage everything that person knows to make my company great. And so my job is to make them shine and then I shine more, right? And so I don't see that as light touch. I see that as collaboration and about and emotional intelligence, understanding how to just pull out all the greatness. And so then when I think of that and in like the trickle down effect of that, um, it's about systems that put in place accountability. And so that the leader doesn't have to lead with a strong arm, right? It's a very clear accountability and how
Yeah.
things work. Um, so I think that when you say,
I
is
like
there
your language. I'm aligning more with your language. I think we're very close to trying to describe the same set of leader behaviors. Um, Let me describe what brought me to this use of the word light. Um, I'm going to reference a particular team and a particular leader, and like you, I'm not going to mention names, but this is a group that I've observed directly, and and a very carefully curated team of people. You could tell at first I thought it was perhaps by randomness, but in fact, as I talked to the leader, she very carefully selected this team. She had a vision for the various capabilities that she was looking for with this team. And then when I interviewed the team members, one of the questions I was asking, a very simple question, what makes her an effective leader? And in every case, they sort of sat back and said, well, I don't know. That's an odd question because she doesn't really lead. I mean, several of them said that she doesn't really lead. We have conversations. We, ultimately, I lead my function. She lets me. This came through several times with several departments. She lets me lead my function, but I keep her, informed. We have collaborative conversations, and as I had those dialogues with each of those direct reports, it felt to me like her leadership was almost invisible. It was definitely there and very powerful, but it didn't feel to any of them like she's monitoring my productivity. She's monitoring my KPIs or my OKRs. She's in fact, she's probably very aware of all of the things that are happening, but what it feels like is she's in this game with me. She's one of my colleagues. She's one of my team members. And her guidance, when I would watch meetings, it was very subtle. It was, she had thoughts or ideas, but she never sucked the air out of the room by being the fountain of all wisdom or the source of all great ideas. But I like your collaborative language. I think it more accurately reflects that kind of leader. But it is, for some leaders, it's natural.
Mhm.
Um, One might make the case, I don't know that this is literally true, but one might make the case that it comes a bit more naturally for women leaders than for men leaders. Um, because I've met women leaders who were the opposite as well, who were very, heavy-handed with I am the fountain of all insight. I am the fountain of wisdom. That's what I was hired to be, hired to do. And then some of them
Those
will
things.
they validate their way. It just annoys the heck out of me when someone uses Steve Jobs as the like the Uber example. Well, Steve Jobs said, "I don't care what customers think. Customers want what I tell them that they want." Now, he may or may not have been quoted as saying that. He may, and he may have been a genius jerk. It's quite possible. You read Walter Isaacson's book about him, and what comes through is a little more of a nuanced image. But I think what happens is some of those famous quotes from him are used by people to say, "Oh, that's leadership." Leadership. A leader has the vision that's better than anyone else's vision and keeps everyone aligned with his vision. Maybe sometimes that's true, but I think going forward into this new world, if you want to surround yourself, if you want to keep technical geniuses, creative geniuses, marketing geniuses, if you want to keep these people and leverage them for your business, you're not going to keep them by being the sole fountain of insight for your organization.
I think that's ego. I think that there's a separation between a visionary and someone who needs to be seen as a visionary and has to be the end all be all, right? That's a leader that has ego. Where when you follow someone, you usually follow them for their vision, for their charisma. You follow them because they have the same values as you. They exhibit them. There is a level of gravitas of, like the leaders that we are talking about, there is something about them that is magical. But then you can have two people, both fantastic companies, both seen as great leaders. One has to have the spotlight and the other gets the spotlight because they just, lead with vision, purpose, and collaboration, right? And so I think the difference between those two and why the teams follow them has to do with the ego.
Yeah, and there is that. So there are those leaders with this very high executive presence, this high gravitas, this high charisma that we're drawn toward, and then there are leaders who are more humble, soft-spoken, more collaborative, and then there's this narrow set of leaders who are actually both. They and I think that is probably what I would hope to aspire toward for most leaders today is there's a way to be charismatic and to draw people in, and yet as you draw them in, it becomes more and more about them, not about you. I read a biography of Oprah Winfrey, and again, I don't know that this is true or not. It's media, so 50-50 chance. It could be totally true, could just be a promotion hype. But how she was described was as highly charismatic, particularly in front of large groups of people, when she's in front of the media. But if you work closely with her, it very quickly becomes about you and her. It's like her laser focus on you and your conversation, and you feel like my relationship with Oprah is as much about me as it is about her. It's not this thing that I see in the media, and I think that description, I've seen it in other lesser known leaders. It's very compelling. It's a way of drawing people to you for life, where those armies will march. They will march and they will give as much as they can give.
That strikes me. There's another person. So when I was doing the news, so put politics aside, I covered Cory Booker a lot, and his presence, I mean, from the first time I met him, he walks into a room and you're just like, and he walks up and, I knew he didn't know me, but, found out my name. The next time he saw me, Tamara, how are you? How's this going? And just all about the people that he was meeting. And it was a presence that you were just like, I can see why people are following him. He's magnetic.
Yeah.
And it was about, what problem can I solve? How can I help you? Like, it wasn't about him most of the time. Now, anyways, that was a long time ago, but it was very clear, kind of that same sort of energy and presence. And again, that's
And
also something that can be cultivated. This is why I'm a huge proponent. If you want to be a leader, get a coach.
yeah, I absolutely, someone who will help you see yourself through the outside world's eyes, because none of us, or very few of us, are so self-aware that we can see ourselves through that the mirror of others. And I know, politics is dangerous. I'm going to tread on dangerous ground. Setting politics aside, though, I hear the same thing about Bill Clinton. I hear the same thing about George Bush. Not surprisingly, you don't hear the same thing about Donald Trump. He doesn't make it all about you.
I covered Bill Clinton once in a huge auditorium, and I mean, he was old. This is when Hillary Clinton was running, and we're all waiting there. He was like 3 hours late, and everyone's tired and hungry. You're locked in this auditorium because you've gone through security and all that. And he gets on stage, and again, same thing. In seconds, he just, I can't explain that type of energy, but it is. Yeah. It's there, and it's true.
And so even if you don't see yourself right now as having that thing, I firmly believe that factor is learnable. You can learn to be a fantastic actor, actress. There's a lot about us that can evolve if we're intentional about our evolution. So I'll share one last quick example, and then I think we have to wrap up because I want to be respectful of your time. But if you knew me in my 30s or my 20s as a leader, this is not the Dan Rust that you would have met. First of all, I'd been an engineer in a nuclear power plant for 6 years. I had an engineer's mind, and I viewed the world through the lens of engineering. I came into the civilian workforce, and I'm so embarrassed now when I think back about the kind of leader that I was, because I was not personable. I was not communicative. I was an engineer, and I gave out tasks, and I gave out data, and I did everything right. And sometimes, we talk heavy-handed. Sometimes I was heavy-handed because I wanted to be compliant and stuff had to be done. And I kept my personal stuff to myself. So here's the quick version of the story. I got passed over for a promotion that I absolutely knew I should have gotten. In fact, it angered me so much because on paper, I was the right person for the role. The way an engineer would think about this, all the pieces fell into place. I should be promoted, and they promoted someone else. The company, to their credit, recognized how frustrated I was and didn't want to lose me. And so they actually gave me a small budget for an executive coach. They said, we want you to grow as a leader, and instead of picking a coach for you, we're going to give you a budget. And I went out and found my own executive coach, and this guy was fantastic. He was I viewed him then as the older guy, but spent 6 months with me, and the first 3 months was mostly talking to me, listening, not much guidance. I was wondering, where's this money going? But then after about 3 months, he also he did kind of a 360 feedback with people that I've reported to. And he helped me see myself through a whole different lens. And at a certain point, he said, after 3 months, I get to know you, and you're actually a pretty personable guy, but it took you 3 months to trust me. It took you 3 months to kind of let some of this stuff go. And he said, I think with a lot of your direct reports, you've never let it go. You're carrying so much protection. And I, without spending too much time on that, it was a moment. It was a moment where I started to shift and evolve and become the non-engineer that you see. I still think like an engineer, but I see the world so differently. I let the world experience me in such a different way. it's almost 360 degrees different. So I think that we can all evolve from little charisma to a lot of charisma, a little something to a lot. It may take time. It might not be easy. And sometimes you have to see painful things in yourself, but you can absolutely do it. So once again, I'm sorry. I'm kind of ranting again. I don't mean to do that, Tamara, but also what tends to happen on calls like this, because you and I are so kind of simpatico in terms of the way we think about things, the conversation gets more and more interesting as we go. And if I don't just cut it off at some point, we'll just talk for another hour. And like I said, I want to be respectful of your time. But given everything that we've talked about, is there, I guess, any final words that you would want to share, any point of view you would want to share with the people that are watching or listening? And I'm sure many of the, as we said, leadership nerds who are experiencing this will definitely, follow up with you, connect with you on LinkedIn or however they connect with you, and people will find those that they want to find to make part of their lives. So, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, leadership is also about experimentation. So try new things, don't get stuck in your patterns, don't get stuck in your ways. Feedback is so important, but it's what you do with it that's even more important. And so as you gather feedback, you also have to find the new things that will help you become better. And so I think not getting stagnant is the number one thing. And people listening to this podcast obviously are trying not to be stagnant.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that self-reflection and then action. Action is the most important part. There's no reason to self-reflect if you are not going to do something about it.
This may be oversharing, but when the executive coach gave me the feedback, initially I was kind of like, I didn't buy it, and I kind of did, kind of didn't. So my girlfriend at the time, I was recounting this to her, and she said, "Oh, I get that." She said, he's absolutely right. And she said, this is painful to share, but she said, the only reason I went on a second date with you is because the restaurant was nice. And then since you were picking nice restaurants, we had a third and a fourth. But she said, it took a while for you to drop the whole Dan Rust thing, the whole thing. And she said, once that kind of got dropped, it turns out you are interesting and charming and other things. But she said, you do not make it easy for people to get to you, man. But then I said, well, why would you not share that with me before? And she said, well, it's once we got to where we got to, it didn't
matter.
Seem like there was much of a point, but your executive coach definitely has a point. So there, thanks for drawing out the oversharing from me. So Tamara Laine, great to connect with you, and I'm sure we will have more conversations in the future. I wish you great success with Empower. I can definitely feel that mission. And I would encourage anyone who enjoys this conversation, check out the What the Frac podcast, because then you can get more of Tamara Laine and her co-host every single week. That would be fantastic. So thank you, Tamara. This was fantastic.
Thank you, Dan. Bye, everyone.